Based on the Stephen King story and adapted for a TV movie in 1991 starring Tim Matheson, Sometimes They Come Back is the sad and tragic story of Jim Norman, who returns to his childhood town to take up a teaching position at a high school. But although this quiet, isolated town may be part of Jim's childhood memories, not all those memories were good, as it was also the town where Jim's brother Wayne was murdered, in which in 1957 the two brothers were apprehended by a gang of greasers. And in a spot of bullying gone wrong, both Wayne and the greasers would end up dead. Despite his childhood trauma, Jim tries to make the most of his new life in his old town, and make the most of it for his family. However, the troubles of the past come back to haunt Jim, as one by one his classroom students start disappearing, where the students are being replaced by new students who look just like the greasers he confronted in the 50s. As it becomes clear that they are in fact the greasers that Jim had to face as a child, and have now come back for revenge, as once again Jim must face the traumas of his past in order to protect his family.
Run, Jimmy, run!
So today we are opening up the can on this not so well known Stephen King story and adaptation, as we explore Sometimes They Come Back. The movie that proves that in the Stephen King universe, not only are clowns and cars evil, but also the cast of Grease is evil too. Let's check it out. One of the greasers appeared in another famous horror movie. So the movie stars Robert Rusler as the main villain and leader of the greaser gang, Robert Lawson. Man, this guy scared the hell out of me when I saw this movie as a kid. I always felt like he looked like an evil version of Luke Perry. Even if he's not a demon from beyond the grave, this guy is still terrifying. There is no way you would want him in your class. However, actor Rusler is also well known for appearing in another horror movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge, where he played the ill-fated best friend to the main protagonist, Ron Grady, who I swear, despite A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 not being the best in the series, definitely has one of the most classic death scenes in the series. And if going from Elm Street to Stephen King still isn't enough to impress you, then Rusler was also in Weird Science and wore a bra on his head with Robert Downey Jr. Classic. Yeah, it doesn't get much more awesome than that. Number 9. It was part of an increasing trend to televise Stephen King stories. Everyone who is familiar with Stephen King adaptations would be aware of his made-for-TV miniseries. From The Stand to The Tommyknockers, many of King's classic stories have indeed been brought onto the small screen for prime-time viewing, and still continue to now, what with entries like The Mist, Under the Dome, and Castle Rock. Stephen King televised adaptations have been around since 1979's Salem's Lot. However, during the 80s, most of King's works were adapted onto the big screen. But jump to 1990 and the King televised adaptations returned with It, starting a new ongoing trend, and the following year Sometimes They Came Back followed. In fact, it made a lot of sense that Sometimes They Come Back would follow It, as the two stories are kinda similar, as they're both about middle-aged people returning to their hometowns to face their childhood fears and traumas. So Sometimes They Come Back was part of a fresh new form of telling King's stories, and was the third televised King story. And from there, other TV adaptations followed, such as the Stand miniseries as mentioned, and Langoliers, and so forth.
Time to rock, Jock.
Number 8. The movie has no Rotten Tomatoes rating. Despite the fact that Sometimes They Come Back does have a fan base, particularly from those who watched it when they were young and subsequently grew up watching it, the movie didn't exactly wow everyone at the time, and still doesn't seem to now. When broadcast, the American TV Times basically said the impressive cast can't really improve the movie, and gave it 2 out of 5. But what's even more intriguing is the fact that it doesn't even have a rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It does, however, have an audience approval rating of 49%. I mean, come on, is the movie really that bad? Yeah, I know it can be corny in places, but it generally has some creepy moments and is competently made.
Hey, I'm cool.
Seriously, I think the movie deserves another viewing, and one where people watch with fresh, open minds and perspectives.
Number 7, Sometimes They Come Back has an impressive co-star lineup. So I already mentioned that Tim Matheson is the movie's lead, straight from his role in Drop Dead Fred. I mean, look, he even still has the same mullet that he had in Drop Dead Fred, along with the main villain played by Robert Rusler. However, Sometimes They Come Back actually has a very impressive cast of co-stars, some of which you may not know about. Jim's wife is played by Brooke Adams, who appeared in the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, along with another Stephen King adaptation, The Dead Zone. Jim's son is played by Robert Gorman, as in that kid from the Leprechaun movie. William Sanderson plays a grown-up version of the greaser who didn't die, who would then go on to help Jim. Sanderson, as most geeks and nerds would recognise, was J.F. Sebastian from Blade Runner. And another one of the greasers is played by Nicholas Sadler, who would go on to play a cop in the late 90s horror comedy Idle Hands, as well as starring in Hellraiser Inferno.
I swear, the cast of this movie is like a who's who of horror movie actors. Except for Tim Matheson, of course. He starred in Drop Dead Fred, which I guess you could say is kind of a horror movie.
Number 6, Sometimes They Come Back was originally going to be made earlier. In 1985, the Dino De Laurentiis Entertainment Group produced the Stephen King movie Cat's Eye. Like the Twilight Zone movie, it was an anthology movie made up of 3 Stephen King stories. However, one of the stories that was going to be included was indeed Sometimes They Come Back. Producer Dino De Laurentiis changed his mind and thought that that story in particular should be its own movie, rather than a shortened segment in an anthology movie. So the story was taken out and replaced with a segment called The Ledge. Dino De Laurentiis did end up producing Sometimes They Come Back, and I can only imagine that it was a televised movie, on the account that it was made after the collapse of his movie company. Making Sometimes They Come Back was another Stephen King entry that Laurentiis had produced, as he had already produced many adaptations, including Cat's Eye as mentioned, The Dead Zone, Firestarter, Maximum Overdrive, and Silver Bullet.
He also produced Halloween 3's Season of the Witch. You know, I just thought I'll throw it out there.
Number 5, the Teleplay was written by a well-known screenwriter. The Teleplay for Sometimes They Come Back was written by Mark Rosenthal. And before you scratch your head and ask who is Mark Rosenthal, well, he's a scriptwriter who has written many movie scripts. Some good, some not so good, but no doubt you would have heard of one or two of them, as he has crafted scripts for movies including The Jewel of the Nile, Superman 4 The Quest for Peace, hey, I did say not all the scripts were perfect, Star Trek 6 The Undiscovered Country, Planet of the Apes, Mona Lisa Smile, Mercury Rising, The Mighty Joe Young, and The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Yeah, I'm noticing a whole good bad thing going on here.
Rosenthal also recorded an audio commentary track for Superman 4 The Quest for Peace, and it's very amusing and holds no bars to just how problematic that movie was, and is definitely worth listening to, as he seems like a pretty funny guy who doesn't beat around the bush and says it how it is. Number 4, filming locations.
Well, Bebop, she's my baby.
The events that happen in the short story of Sometimes They Come Back takes place in Stratford, Connecticut, of which some of the location does have an aging, lost town that time forgot kind of feel about it. Or at least that's the vibe I get from the pictures that I've seen of the town. However, the movie itself was actually filmed in Kansas City, Kansas, which to me gives the movie a slightly more country feel. But hey, I digress, it's just nice to finally have a Stephen King story that doesn't take place in Maine, so I'll take it. Number 3, there were 2 unrelated sequels. So, yeah, despite the fact that Sometimes They Come Back didn't exactly wow people when it came out, it still got 2 sequels. First up, there was Sometimes They Come Back Again, which was a 1996 straight-to-video release, which literally just recycles the first movie's poster. And not only that, it actually reuses aerial shots filmed for Beetlejuice. The movie has nothing to do with the events of Sometimes They Come Back, other than it being about a gang of demonic teenage bullies. This time the main bully is played by Alexis Arquette, and oh my god, does Arquette turn up the insane-o-meter in this one. Alexis plays the part so batshit insane and over the top, it makes the movie worth watching just for this so ridiculous, it's awesome performance. I mean, there is even a scene where the character kills someone via throwing deadly tarot cards at them while telling them the famous "This little piggy went to the market" nursery rhyme.
Looks like another little piggy trying to get to market. Seems to me this little piggy should have stayed home today.
Yep, we have entered a whole new level of insanity here. The movie also stars Hilary Swank and Michael Gross, but it's definitely Arquette who steals the show. And the sequel even uses elements from not only the original book that weren't in the original movie, but it also has traces of King's original Lawnmower Man story as well. Then in 1998 a third entry came out called Sometimes They Come Back for More, which I didn't even know about till a year or so ago. This time the action takes place on a base in Antarctica and has a book about conjuring up the devil and undead minions attacking the base or something like that.
Yeah, no thanks. If I want terror at an Antarctic base involving a strange supernatural force, I'll stick to John Carpenter's The Thing, thank you very much.
Number 2. Production problems. The movie was shot in just 30 days, and despite its swiftness in which it was made, there were 2 major issues that got in the way of filming Sometimes They Come Back. One of them being the fact that actress Brooke Adams twisted her ankle during the filming, and the other being that a violent thunderstorm completely shut down the movie's production temporarily. In fact, the production didn't have the best of luck weather-wise, as on the first day of filming it started to snow. Number 1. Differences between the book and movie. Sometimes They Come Back was written by Stephen King in a short story in 1974, and was then published in his anthology novel The Night Shift in 1978, and there are many differences between the book and movie. For example, the movie is set in 1990, whereas the book, the events take place in 1974. In the book, protagonist Jim is a younger man in his 30s, whereas in the movie they used a middle-aged Tim Matheson. In the book, the student murders start taking place over Christmas. In the movie, the gang of greasers are killed by the same train that kills Wayne when 9-year-old Jimmy took their car keys, whereas in the book they died during a police pursuit after murdering Wayne and then subsequently hitting a power line and getting electrocuted. And in the book, Jim's wife is murdered by the greasers, and Jim defeats them by summoning up a demon to stop them, with the demon taking on the form of his brother Wayne, unlike the movie where Wayne himself actually appears in spirit.
I honestly think that the changes that were made make it a better story for the screen, whereas the story version does seem more brutal and down to the nitty gritty, what with the murdering of main characters and demons. I think that Sometimes They Come Back is a hidden little gem that other people haven't seen or have forgotten about. But lucky I'm here to remind everyone, so I say check it out! It's definitely a must for all Stephen King fans at least. Anyway, I'm Minty, and run Jimmy run!